Welcome back to Absolute Units, the official podcast of the Museum of English Rural Life. I'm Joe Vaughan, the museum's social media manager, and my co-host is Dr. Ollie Douglas, the World Curator of Collections. This episode, we chat about what's been happening recently at the museum, as well as what's coming up on the podcast, plus a bunch of other topics that may come across as very random, but all actually connect, not just because we're the ones speaking about them. This includes Star Wars, the World Cup, Stardew Valley, Bad Bunny, and much more. We're about to cover a lot of ground, and we're grateful, as always, to have you along for the ride. Enjoy.
Been a while. It's always been a while.
It's always been a while.
Constantly been a while.
It has always been a while.
But that's appropriate in a museological sense because
We're working in museum time.
Yeah,
It has been a while. We're a place built around whiles.
yeah,
Yeah.
epochs,
Eras.
It's like our eras tour. Except
Is that what it is?
podcast.
That's what it,
style.
that's what it is.
Yeah,
Our editorial strategy.
yeah.
Eras tour. Yeah. I like it.
We might even get on to folklore later. That's another Swifty reference.
Exactly. Damn, that was good.
That's exhausted.
We haven't dug enough into that, Ollie.
Yeah, that's exhausted by
Your
Taylor Swift references.
Yeah. Well, this episode we're just gonna have a chat about things we've done, things we've got coming up.
Yeah, we've got a list of things that we've
We
done
do have a
because we
list.
can't remember what we've done.
We do have a list, and we have a question from Blue Sky as well that we'll get onto at some point.
Yeah.
Firstly, it's been a couple of months since we finished Radical Rural. We obviously had the podcast where we chatted through the experience of doing that, what we learned, what we liked, what we wanted to carry on. But what's been happening since then?
A few tiny sort of changes and ebbs and flows emerging from that work. We heard news that Tom Oliver, who joined us with Marcia Briel for two fairly recent podcasts, is
Our last two podcasts, even.
Yeah, he's stepping back as Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research in the Environment. Hard to tell whether that's because of the cumbersome nature of the job title, but I think actually what Tom said is that he's really keen to get back into the research that he's particularly positive about taking forward, and that presumably will be some of the nature-centric Catalyst project work. Hopefully I can watch this space and more exciting stuff from Tom and Marcia and friends.
Future podcasts in the making.
Yeah, and maybe a new Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research in the Environment who we can rope in and involve in other ways. So that's cool too.
Yeah.
We did hear some rumours on the Martian...
From the Fobney
Martian rumour mill about their own podcast or pondcast. So I don't think they've recorded anything yet, but I think we wait with bated breath.
I will be tuning in. I will be tuning in if that comes to pass.
Yeah, and there's been lots of exciting chat on the Martians WhatsApp groups about hummingbird hawk moths and other exciting sightings in and around the marsh. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff going on there. And our colleague Maddie Ding and I will be working on accessioning some material from Radical Rural, including some of the pieces connected to Adrian and the Martians into the collection. So that's coming up after the summer.
Nice.
Yeah. So
that's cool. So things are still happening.
Yeah. And I'm hoping still to take some elements of this conversation to the Oxford Real Farming Conference next year. Haven't quite heard yet whether that will happen, but I'm planning on other ways that we can continue the conversations about all of those exciting kind of rural and environmental protest narratives that emerged in that project. So.
And at some point, we'll be picking that up with Mara Oliver. Is that right, with the CPRE?
Yes. So there was going to be, and I think we've mentioned this in a previous podcast, there was going to be an intervention in the galleries that Mara has been working on, an audiovisual experience that's connected to histories of CPRE. I think it's not going to happen this year now. It's probably going to be pushed back into next year. But that will make it all the more exciting and more time for build up and anticipation. So again, another example of watch this space, but those are emerging from Mara's Merrill Fellowship.
Watch this space and listen to this space, because I'm pretty sure that would be a podcast we'd like to record as well.
Yeah, definitely. And she's been looking at CPRE archive material,
which is the campaign to protect rural England.
Yeah.
For anyone.
It's the campaign for the preservation of rural England at the start.
Okay.
And the CPRE archive has little hints of connections and strands of overlap with conservation movements in North America as well. So Mara is an historian of 20th century America, and she's been looking at some of those sort of parallel histories, and that will give shape to whatever this exciting experience in the galleries will be. So really looking forward to speaking to her about that. And it's another great example of exciting sort of digital humanities work emerging from the University of Reading, where we're beginning to get a real headwind of skill and expertise in that area.
For anyone not familiar with the term, would you just dig into digital humanities as a practice? What does that involve?
It's very broad-based, and I think it's really just using digital tools as means to deepen humanities research and engagement. So this might be using databases as a way to record and gather histories and stories and biographies, or it could be using online tools as a means of disseminating and publishing histories and stories about human experience. But in the case of Mara's intervention in the galleries, it will be using audiovisual material, presumably some screen-based or possibly projected material, as a way of disseminating some of the exciting histories and material that she's unearthed. So lots of broad-based ways of understanding that, I think. What do you understand by digital humanities? Because you must encounter that term as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess it's ways of using digital tools to do arts-based engagement, I think. Really, I was as you were describing it, I was wondering, I mean, I guess this is digital humanities in a way, what we're doing with the podcast.
Yeah. And we have in the University of Reading, we have a digital humanities research centre and hub, which is led by Mara. So it's we're in a good place, I think, with exciting new things emerging around the digital.
Well, alongside lots of changes in our work, obviously there's lots happening in the wider UK context with a change of Prime Minister, and that will bring policy changes and affect all kinds of life, both in the countryside and beyond. What are you aware of so far from Andy Burnham's, what that will bring?
No change at the top in terms of Culture Minister. So nothing, I'm not expecting any radical shift in arts and culture and heritage. Some changes in environment and rural affairs. There's a really good thread on this on Blue Sky. Guy Shrubsole was sort of charting and tracking some of these changes as they emerged.
We've got him in.
Yeah, I mean, you have to mention Guy in every episode now. So it's like a challenge.
Bingo.
Yeah. Guy Shrubsole bingo.
Yeah.
Guy, thank you for that.
Yeah. We'll stick a link to the thread in the show notes.
And I guess the other thing worth just thinking about is the emergence of the idea of number 10 North. The question of whether Manchester is actually the North. I think all the places further north than that in England and the UK might question the northerliness of Manchester and its credentials in that regard. But that sense of a rising tide of devolution, rural devolution or regional devolution in England is an interesting question, because it comes back to those ideas of at what scale you operate, and the relationship between regions and counties and the national identity. And we've obviously got that challenge in the collections here, because we're a national collection with a heavy bias towards Southeast England, because that's the nature of collecting. You collect things that are closer to home in larger numbers and greater volume than those that are farther afield. So I think maybe there's some interesting questions that run in parallel to questions that underpin our collection there. But let's see what happens. Interesting
about Englishness.
Yeah,
in a way. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to come down in a sort of hard and critical way on whether you're northern if you're from Manchester. It wouldn't be my position to say, and I think it's more for people from Manchester to say whether they consider themselves northern or not. But if you're from Newcastle or Carlisle or places further north, perhaps you feel differently.
Yeah. Well, I kind of get that as well. I mean, I'm from the Midlands, and a lot of people in the south say I'm from the north.
Yeah. And
I heard someone on the train once going through Oxford saying we're in the north now. I was like, what?
Is Oxford north?
Apparently,
it's north of here.
It's north of someone. Yeah.
So I come from far north, and I live in Oxford, far to the north.
Far to the north.
Yeah, it's cold up there. It's not. It's really hot. It's hot everywhere.
Yeah. Just on the heat, obviously another really distressing news story recently has been the coverage about the wildfires. I mean, do we have anything in our collection that speaks to the history of that? I mean, obviously it massively implicates rural context.
Yeah, I think we have material obviously related to extreme weather events, and there's obviously a degree to which some of the recent wildfires have been connected quite strongly to heat waves. So it's a bit of a sort of stereotypical thing to dwell on now, but the hot summer of 1976 it crops up when talking about extreme weather events, and there's amazing material in the collections that relate strongly to the hot summer of 76.
What do we have?
Well, bizarrely, this includes a copy of the single "I've Got a Brand New Combine Harvester" by the Wurzels, which I think was out and went to number one in 1976. So that's one interesting thing that connects to the hot summer of 76, but also interesting photographic collections from Farmers Weekly and other press publications that chart the visual impact of that in terms of the sort of devastating droughts and how they shaped farmland and impacted. So that's one strong connection. I think the other key area of connectivity probably connects back again to the conversations we had with Guy, as all good things do, but in connection to the maintenance of moorland and upland areas, and how often traditionally those were burned in order to burn back heather and other forms of scrub to encourage growth of grass. And those are obviously really dangerous and risky things to do. Also, I guess there's material in there about forest fires and the risk of forest fires, particularly in Forestry Commission or Forestry England land. So there are connections. There won't be much related to the more recent kinds of wildfires that we've been experiencing, largely because those are obviously connected really strongly to climate breakdown. And as climate breakdown progresses, we're going to experience more and more of these things, and we're just not very well set up for dealing with them.
As people, you mean, or as a collection?
Well, I think either. Either way. I mean, we can make links. We can make sort of tangential links in the galleries. We have a fire engine, a horse-drawn fire engine that would have been a village fire engine, hand pumped with leather buckets and pipes and I guess that's one way of reflecting on how rural communities and villages might grapple collectively with these challenges. In other parts of Europe, they have volunteer fire workers who gather together to protect their communities when these things threaten them. It's incredibly dangerous and frightening work, though. So I think we'd probably need to roll out a wider program of training if we were going to go down that path in a major way in this country. And at the moment, as far as I can understand it, the government authorities have these things relatively well under control. They're on top of them in this country, in this climate, but it's only a matter of time before they get worse here as well.
Yeah. It's an interesting example of how our collection can speak to the present.
Yeah, and this brings us, I guess, back to Radical Rural and some of those threads running through that, which were about environmental protection and conservation and
contemporary engagement as well. I think that's why it came to mind when we were thinking about what we were going to talk about.
Yeah. So anything that we can do to encourage people to engage with the natural world, with environment, and with protection of those spaces and places is positive, I think, in helping to protect us against wildfires, if not literally, then sort of conceptually.
Yeah. in slightly different news, since we last recorded, we've also had the World Cup. Did you
I
follow?
watched
Did you
far-
watch it?
I watched far more of the World Cup than I was expecting to, actually.
Yeah.
Partly because Scotland were in it, ever so fleetingly and briefly.
Yeah.
So watched a bit of that, but it was amazing to see the England team do so well. And my wife is half Spanish, so
So it was a victory in the Douglas.
There was a Spanish supporting contingent in the household.
Yeah.
So, we managed to cling on till the bitter end supporting, despite Scotland crashing out so early and England not making it to the finals. So
in a way, at least it wasn't the Spain-England final.
Yeah. But I think
I don't think England would have won a Spain-England final anyway.
Not judging by the way Spain played, but I think I mean the third place playoff was very exciting there.
It was amazing. Yeah.
And I think all of these things obviously speak powerfully to the way in which we shape national cultures and project ourselves on a world stage, which again ties quite neatly and powerfully back into what the Museum of English Rural Life is trying to do, albeit on a slightly less significant level and stage than the English national football squad.
Although we don't have hydration breaks.
Well, and we do actually have hydration breaks, because you tell me off if I lift up my glass whilst recording.
We do have hydration breaks, but they're very reasonable.
Yeah, and they're not timetabled in.
They're not an excuse for advertising.
No.
Maybe and no halftime shows.
Yeah. Well, the halftime show was, I think, quite interesting in that quite often in these contexts, rural themes creep in, partly because rural stuff is emblematic of national identities all over the world. But in this one, I didn't see very much in the way of a nod to the sort of rural in any of that halftime show. I mean, I'm just harking back to the Superbowl show earlier in the year, where the Bad Bunny performance, there were a whole series of mobile hedges, or people dressed up as hedges. So there was quite literally landscape environments moving around the
halftime show.
Yeah. And then thinking back to London 2012, where there was a huge section that was all about the sort of green and pleasant land and the dark satanic mills and the Industrial Revolution and the impact on sort of pastoral and rural England or
it was
rural
like
Britain.
A sort of potted history of England, wasn't it?
Yeah, there were loads of people dressed in smocks and carrying shepherd's crooks and Isambard Kingdom Brunel presiding over the destruction of it all.
Yeah.
It was.
Well, I see your Bad Bunny and raise you slightly limply at one Justin Bieber, because I'm pretty sure Bieber was playing like some kind of country music at the World Cup.
I guess
show.
He was.
I can't remember what song it was, but I think he came out with an acoustic guitar.
Okay, so he was sufficiently folk. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't, if I was grading it, I wouldn't give it a passing mark on the rural attainment scale. But
he was considerably more rural than Madonna was. I'll give you that.
Yes, I did enjoy the fact that Madonna essentially opened for the Muppets.
Yeah,
which was great.
Yeah,
that was good. But I thought it was really good. It was a very, very good World Cup.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't excited about it at all, but I ended up watching a lot of it.
Yeah, and it's getting bigger next time.
And then the time after, we'll have every team in the world.
Yeah.
And the time after that, we'll have every team.
We'll have to field the team.
We'll play. Yeah.
Museum of English Rural Life.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't know. Well, we've never lost a World Cup game yet.
No, we're undefeated.
We're unbeaten. Yeah. Some record, actually.
Yeah. We're undefeated in any sport, in fact. And that's not a challenge to any of our listeners. We have
Please do not
intention
test us. Yeah. We did do a thread about a best 11 of rural football names. And I can't
there were
remember.
some good ones. Yeah.
There were some really good ones.
Yeah.
There were some really deep cuts as well. But
I think Marino didn't crop up, though, I noticed.
I think Marino did.
I
think Marino did.
Yeah.
Wait, let me see if I can find it.
Haaland was there.
Haaland was there.
Yeah.
Ødegaard, I think, was there because Ødegaard, I think it means like wasted farm.
Yeah. I mean, linguistically, it was very interesting, learning quite a bit about the degree to which names connected to sort of rural roles.
Yeah. Ødegaard I'm butchering the pronunciation of that, so apologies to any Norwegian listeners. But yeah, it originates with deserted farm, and apparently it's to do with waste from the Black Death.
Okay.
So it's farmland that was abandoned because of the plague.
And if you want a good discussion of waste in the English context, go back to the episodes we did with Katrina Navikas.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different kind of waste.
Yeah. I'm just going to see if I can find this thread.
Listen whilst Joe reads to you from social media. Don't bother looking yourself anymore, because Joe can just read it out to you.
Once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You get your dose.
It's like a sort of, yeah.
Get your dose.
Just a summary. Joe's selection of the finest socials.
Where the heck is the...
Where did I put my thread?
I have found it now. So some of the highlights are Franz Beckenbauer. Surname means a farmer who is a baker. Alan Shearer, of course.
Classic. Yeah.
Classic, yeah.
Wasn't playing though.
No. Bastian Schweinsteiger, which means Mr. Pig Wrangler.
Big Wrangler.
Someone said, John, oh no, my field is full of stones. He's on the bench, I think.
Yeah.
De Boer, which is the farmer, and Koeman, which is cowman from the Netherlands. There were loads more. The people of Blue Sky are amazing.
Yeah. I think Koeman is the name of the furniture maker who made the spiky bench in the Merrill Galleries. Philip Koeman.
Interesting.
Yeah. I have no idea whether...
Rural roots run deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about Vaughan? What does Vaughan mean? Douglas means dark water.
Comes from the Welsh Baichan, which means small. I'm definitely mispronouncing that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it was good. It was good effort.
Yeah.
Even if you're mispronouncing it.
Yeah. Or Baichan, I think.
We're putting ourselves out there linguistically in this episode, just...
Going beyond England.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, going from one set piece to another, it's also the 75th anniversary of the Festival of Britain.
Yeah, so I think that moment is sort of ongoing across the summer. And we talked, I guess, a little bit about the Festival of Britain and those connections in the first episodes of the year, didn't we?
Yeah. Would you just recap what the Festival of Britain was for anyone who's not familiar?
Yeah, so this is going back to 1951, the museum's foundational year, but also the year of a World's Fair style event, a big exposition largely on London's South Bank. So a sort of amazing cultural site with lots of different pavilions covering different aspects of British industry and life and experience, including a rural pavilion. So we have material that was on display in that country pavilion in 1951 and is now part of our collection here at the Museum of English Rural Life. There were also other things going on up and down the country. So in Northern Ireland, there was a model farm. There was an exhibition in Edinburgh and other stuff in other parts of the UK as well. What's really interesting about the Festival of Britain is that it's like, I guess, that kind of 2012 Olympics moment or any of these other big sort of global stage style events. It's a way of selling the UK to the rest of the world. It's a way of showing everyone that the UK is back in business post Second World War. It's a reconstruction Britain exercise in sort of boosting both national morale. It was described as a tonic for the nation, but also showing everyone else in the world that the UK was open for business. So many people who were around in 1951 will still remember experiencing at least some elements of the Festival of Britain. Usually they will remember the Skylon, which was this amazing kind of rocket-like sculpture on London's South Bank, or they might remember the Dome of Discovery, which was also later the inspiration for the Millennium Dome.
I'm just going to Google the Skylon.
The Skylon, yeah. So it looks sort of amazing, futurist, kind of modernist structure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No longer there, obviously. So that's basically the main thrust of the Festival of Britain. We did back in when it was the Merrill's 70th anniversary, so 5 years ago now, back in 2021, we did a whole load of stuff as part of a project called 51 Voices, where we chose 51 items from the collection connected in some way with 1951, and we invited lots of other people and communities to respond to and connect to those objects and collections items. there was a lot of material in there that was
an amazing archive of responses.
Yeah, and that connected together not only stuff from the Museum of English Rural Life collections, but also material from a Great Exhibition collection that we have. So the Great Exhibition happened in 1851, so it was 100 years before the Festival of Britain. And in that Great Exhibition collection, which is part of the University of Reading's special collections, there's also material about the Festival of Britain. So lots of exciting content there.
And you were talking about this on Radio 4.
I was. That was exciting.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, clearly I've got a voice for radio now that we've been doing the podcast for so long.
Well, I think you definitely do.
Yeah. So I was invited to be part of a 3-part series that Neil McGregor has been presenting on Radio 4, which is about both the kind of earlier exhibitions that came before the Festival of Britain and also about the Festival of Britain itself and legacies of that as an event. And the whole premise of the programme was to explore a sense of who Britain thought it was at that point in time or in these earlier periods. So I was part of the second episode, and Neil was looking in particular at the Empire exhibition in Glasgow in 1938, so a little bit earlier, and was tying that to conversations about rural life, because that's in the sort of formative years of the CPRE, who we've already spoken a little bit about. And it was the year during which they published a big whopper volume of a text called Britain and the Beast. So working with the National Trust and other organisations, this big sort of manifesto essentially for how we grapple with challenges and changes to the countryside that are seen to be coming.
Is that the proverbial beast?
The beast is essentially it's the harm of industrial change, of modernization, of urban expansion. It's what one of the key figures involved in that, the architect and planner Clough Williams Ellis, would have referred to as the octopus. So he wrote a famous book called England and the Octopus.
That's come up a few times on the podcast.
And the octopus is these sort of tentacles of new development coming out of urban centres and sort of in an uncontrolled way reaching out harmfully into the countryside.
Am I right that John Maynard Keynes contributed to that as well?
Yeah, so Britain and the Beast is a really odd collection because it is a manifesto, but it's also a very incoherent manifesto, and it's got a whole load of people arguing a whole load of different things about how perhaps we can protect the countryside. It's at a critical moment, so it falls in that interwar period, but at the tail end of that interwar period, so it's only a year before the Second World War. The Second World War is almost inevitable at that point. And John Maynard Keynes, for those of you who don't know much about him, is a really critical and important and sort of celebrity economist. We don't get any celebrity economists these days, but he's an extraordinarily influential figure in the first half of the 20th century. In the aftermath of the First World War, he was there at the peace conference at Versailles and had left because he couldn't agree with the way in which they were approaching reparations post-war. His argument was that if you impose vast reparations on Germany or on anyone, they will inevitably rise up again. And by the time of the Second World War, he was sort of proven to be right. So the consequences of the peace is the sort of classic text on that. In his contribution to Britain and the Beast, he makes a really extraordinary kind of argument in favour of, I guess, the thing that Maynard Keynes is best known for, which is this idea that in times of sort of financial struggle, in times of depression, the best thing for national governments to do is to invest, to have big building programs, infrastructure programs. You create the jobs and the economy, and the infrastructure sort of drives that process, and that drives economic recovery. So this is the kind of classic mode of Keynesian economics. So in that interwar period is a big depression, and he's arguing in favour of this kind of thing in the context of Britain and the Beast. So he's arguing in favour of development in the context of a text that's sort of trying to shape how we develop in a rational, controlled and careful way that doesn't harm the countryside.
That's a really interesting tension.
Yeah, and his big argument is actually to knock down a whole load of slums and older construction and disused urban land, clear it all on London's South Bank, and to build big new modern structures and housing estates there. So he sort of hints at the future Festival of Britain. He's hinting at something that comes about.
Did that happen?
Well, they did. They constructed the festival site on exactly the kind of land that he's talking about. Sometime later, he's also really interesting because after the war, he plays a really key role in the development of the Arts Council, or actually maybe it's during the Second World War. But the Arts Council is a kind of organization that obviously now funds museums and
including this podcast,
and the wider arts, and it's sort of celebrating its own 75th, I guess now, and he's a kind of key figure in shaping what the Arts Council becomes, and it's really something that's more about higher art and culture and less so about vernacular art and culture, and certainly not so much about heritage at that point in time. So there's a kind of tension running through that in his role in relation to all of this. The other thing that emerged in that really interesting discussion with Neil MacGregor is he was talking about at the Empire Exhibition of Glasgow, which takes place in Bellahouston Park. It's a huge event in 1938. It's another kind of invest money to make money kind of event. You know, they build huge structures and millions of people go and participate. In the middle of that context, they have a kind of construction of a Highland village, and this construction of a Highland village called Anclachan is there as a kind of romantic reference to the sort of Scottish Highland past, and it's deliberately sort of tumble down and romantic, and it proved incredibly popular. So it's like a little nod to all of those open air museums that emerged later in the 20th century. So we're not an open air museum, but
quite deliberately not an open air museum from the founding documents of the museum. It was almost made in opposition.
Yeah, the intention was to be an open air museum, but we were never given the ground and the land to be an open air museum.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
I didn't know that. All I know is the amazing letter.
Yeah,
was it Higgs?
No, there's a letter from the then Vice Chancellor, Frank Stenton.
Stenton, yeah.
Yeah, and he's basically talking about how he doesn't want it to be an open-air museum.
Yeah.
And that's partly because they want to use that White Knights campus up the road for university buildings, not for vernacular architecture.
Which, in credit to them, they did to a fantastic extent. Yeah.
And around about the same time, I mean, just a shout out to our friends at the Highland Folk Museum in Kingussie. This is an institution that was founded by a woman called Isabel Grant, or Elsie Grant. And Elsie Grant was herself inspired by museums further south. So as a child, she visited London and saw the British Museum and various national museums. The British Museum, of course, was at one point presided over by none other than Neil MacGregor, who was a former British Museum director. But Elsie Grant begins to collect material culture related to Highland folk life and folkways. She's already written a book in the mid-1920s about Highland folk culture, and she's encouraged in these researches by none other than John Maynard Keynes, who she worked for as a researcher. So Keynes has his hand in almost everything at this point in time. But Elsie Grant goes on to found this museum, which at that point in 1938 is outgrowing its first site, which is an old disused church, and it's about to move on to the mainland and find its second site. And it's, I think, in the sort of late wartime period that it moves to its current site. But in that site, it has reconstructions of Highland village architecture. And I just discovered only this morning, when I was trying to make sense of all of this, that Elsie Grant did in fact contribute towards the Empire Exhibition in 1938 as well. Wow. not to the Anclacan exhibit, but
No.
to a separate exhibit that showed Highland folkways in a different context. So there's a whole load of stuff going on there.
Well, something amazing that occurs to me is that, you know, this episode, we just sort of lifting the rail a little bit. Every episode we have a sort of talking points of what we want to cover. We often go wildly off piste and end up in brilliant sort of side quests that we didn't expect. But for this episode, we kind of had a list of relatively disparate topics that we thought, you know, there is a connection. There's a sort of narrative through this. But as we've gone on it, it's so clear that actually, you know, the connections between these disparate topics, whether it's Bad Bunny and the World Cup or whatever else, it kind of reflects the way in which places like the Museum of English Rural Life come together through that kind of patchwork and arrangement of different threads of history, whether that's Keynes or you know, the Empire Exhibition or the Festival of Britain. It's amazing.
Happenstance and accidental as well as deliberate and purposeful. Yeah. I think there's kind of, you know, we're a mishmash of all those things, aren't we?
And we're 75 years into that mishmash.
Yeah.
Making podcasts about it.
And continuing to be happenstance and accidental as much as we are. Hit and miss.
Which is great, which is a great way of being.
Yeah. And I think it works well.
Positive way of being.
Well, it works well because it's, to some extent, reflects that need for places like this museum to reflect their audiences, the people who buy into what we're doing and think it's important, and those communities whose identities are shaped through arts and culture and heritage. You know, when something resonates, whether it's like this, the podcast, or, you know, the Radical Rural display, or the work of our colleague Philippa on sanctuary seekers and museums of sanctuary, you know, whatever it might be, those things shape and change the institution moving forward just a little bit. And, you know, we're not where we were when we set out in 1951, and we're not what we were intended to be when we set out in 1951, but we're what people need us to be in 2026. You know, that's really,
and we continue. Yeah.
And who knows where we'll be and what people will need us to be in, you know,
25 years time. Well, 2051. Sounds like a sci-fi film.
That'll be for someone else to worry about, surely. Maybe I'll dodder in with a walking stick. We could do it.
Maybe we could do it. If we're not both here, then maybe we could do a guest podcast, or a guest. I don't know what they'll be doing. Hologram. Holograms feel both sort of forward-thinking and deeply retro. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, definitely.
They remind me of Star Wars.
Yeah.
Episode 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always an obscure film reference in here. That's not that obscure, to be fair.
No.
Yeah.
Good rural life in Star Wars, though. He's a farmer, isn't he?
His uncle's a farmer.
His uncle's a farmer, yeah.
Yeah. And he goes off hunting, doesn't he?
Yeah, in the first film?
In the first film, he talks about shooting something.
There's a lot of shooting.
Blasting something.
There's a lot of blasting. Yeah.
But they have, in one of the later ones, they have kind of tractor-like sort of vehicles as well.
That'll have to be a separate episode.
Yeah. Well, the rural and agricultural references of Star Wars.
What would be a good title for that?
Episode 1.
My brain's like hopping around R2D2 EIEIO type. C3PEIEIO. There we go.
Excellent.
There we go. Yeah. But anyway, just going back a little bit, a few references ago to Keynes. Keynes also had links to the Bloomsbury Group. Is that right?
Yeah, no, he's a member of the Bloomsbury
right, I didn't realise
Group.
that.
And alongside E.M. Forster, who's another contributor to CPRE's work.
And we'll have another link to E.M. Forster coming up on the podcast soon when we interview our director, Kate Arnold Forster.
Yeah, connections left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
It's a very holistic episode, this. Isn't it?
It is amazing. Yeah. But no, I bring that up because we have an exhibition coming up next year about the Bloomsbury Group, and it's linked to, well, all kinds of collections here, really. Do you want to chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, so hopefully we'll get some of the people involved in curating that on to talk in more detail about...
Hannah would be amazing, who was, I think, the star of our second episode, Dr. Hannah Lyons.
Yeah, and we can talk about the core of that, which is about press archive materials and book collections. Again, more a part of our university special collections than the Museum of English Rural Life collection. We have a big archive of British publishing material here at the university. But alongside that, we're going to try and tell some stories in the museum's galleries that connect ideas of Bloomsbury through to the English rural. And Bloomsbury Group are known for, you know, their retreating out into the countryside at various points in time, and an aesthetic that's, I guess, strongly inspired by English rural sort of cottage interiors, a kind of sort of mid-century kind of look, folk painting kind of, you know, decorative cottage look. So lots of stuff to talk about there, and I think there'll be a really interesting gallery trail will emerge from that work that might not be focused particularly on core members of Bloomsbury, so it might not pick up on John Maynard Keynes or E.M. Forster or Virginia Woolf or any of the rest of them, but it will pick up on, I guess, ideas of retreat in the countryside and some of those sort of creative and artistic connections and inspirations as well.
Yeah, amazing. And yeah, just going back to mentioning that we're going to be recording with our director, Kate. So Kate Arnold Forster has been the director of museums and collections at the University of Reading for 20
plus years.
20 plus years. And,
yeah. And we can ask her precisely how long.
Yeah, and overseen enormous transformation here. I mean, I think, yeah, the things like the Absolute Unit tweet is a direct result of the changes Kate made at the top that I think, just transformed our museum and our approach. So
Kate's overseen 2 redevelopments of the Museum of English Rural Life. So the first one that brought it down to this site from its former site up on the White Knights campus. And that was in 2004 and reopened to the public in 2005. And then 10 years on from that, we had the Our Country Lives redevelopment that our colleague Isabel Hughes led on, but obviously under Kate's leadership again, which oversaw a sort of transformation of the gallery spaces and set the sort of tone and framework for much greater focus on digital outputs, on online content, on all of that social media material that you take forward so brilliantly, Joe. All of that stuff essentially has emerged under Kate's tenure. So really interesting to have a conversation with her and get her to reflect and think back over what's been an extraordinarily impactful time at the museum in terms of those changes. So essentially, a third of the museum's time has been more or less under her leadership.
Yeah, amazing.
And we talk endlessly about John Higgs as a sort of founding figure, an establishment figure, alongside those people who were involved in setting up the museum in the early years. But John Higgs was only the keeper of the museum for about 8 years. He played a part in setting it up and sort of set the ball rolling, but Kate's been here for more than twice that length of time. So,
Well, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, moving away from thinking about the sort of founder of the museum to the people who have played such a key part in its in the institutional present, but as that present becomes part of our history, and as you say, I mean, it's 20 years, it's a third of the mill's existence. So
it's basically the sort of period of my museum's career as well, because I was studying museum studies in around about 2000, and just bearing witness to the sort of staggering changes to arts and culture and funding in museums and heritage, and the direction of travel from that point to now is. That in and of itself is an extraordinary story, but to be able to talk to Kate and her part in that,
Looking forward to that.
Several towering figures in British museology, from Neil MacGregor and his time at the helm of the National Gallery, the British Museum, and latterly the Humboldt Forum. He was the founding director of three global national museums, but also Kate Arnold Forster, who's steered this national icon for quarter of a century.
Yeah.
What a privilege.
Extraordinary times.
Yeah. We live in extraordinary times.
We do live in extraordinary times.
Yeah.
Unprecedented times.
Yeah. At times when, Bad Bunny can have
Can have
walking
moving
hedges in the middle of the Super Bowl.
And we will do a podcast on hedges at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll have one hopefully with Jeremy Burchard, who's a historian at the University of Reading and is writing about fences and hedges at the moment. Whether he knows much about Bad Bunny, I don't know. But
we'll keep that in our back pocket.
Yeah. Just slam dunk him with that when he's not expecting it.
Yeah. Before we wrap, we had one question from Blue Sky that we want to talk about, which is... Wow, that was loud. Was that the squeaky chair?
Was it my chair?
I don't know.
It was outside, wasn't it?
Oh, it might be outside. There's been a lot of noise in the... in the headphones, there's been a lot of noise this episode, but I can't tell if it's like...
That's me just humming, just to sort of try and throw you off your ball.
Yeah.
I'm just
We've talked a lot about ball today.
Yeah.
We've also talked a lot about billhooks online, and our mentions are full of people conversing about billhooks, which is amazing.
Are you really into billhooks?
I wasn't as of, but I mean, I am now. Whether I want to be or not, I'm deep in billhooks, but it's great seeing people talk about it on the internet.
Yeah. There used to be an amazing web resource about billhooks.
Is it a load of old billhooks?
Yeah, really,
it's still there. Yeah, so people are talking about that because we shared that earlier.
Yeah, it's an incredible resource and really useful. And the guy who put it together is a sort of extraordinary mind of expertise on British-made billhooks. Someone
in our mentions has said that if you're on Facebook, there's an excellent group called Billhook Junkies.
Oh wow! So there you go.
There you go.
Billhooks, just in case no one knows this, they're obviously connected quite strongly to hedge laying. So there's a segue back to hedges, and
everything connects.
Everything connects.
Let me find this question. Just scrolling through so many billhooks.
We have quite a lot of billhooks in the collection.
Yeah.
I think my favourite ones are probably ones that are they're made out of recycled farrier's rasps. So these are files that are used in shoeing horses, and they have a sort of indented file rough pattern on them. So when you take the high quality steel that they're made out of and beat them into the shape of a billhook, they retain a kind of subtle impression of that pattern on them.
That's cool.
So they've got a kind of textured pattern on the blade, and they're very nice.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I found the question. The question's from Anne Sheepdip. So thank you, Anne Sheepdip, for asking us. Anne says, really interested in the current wave of interest in folk history, artifacts, customs, etc., especially from younger people. Can you account for it as the Merle takes its rightful place in the vanguard?
Well, before we do that, I think we have to address the fact that Anne has missed her calling as an international footballer, if that is truly her surname. Anne Sheepdip, please.
Anne Sheepdip could join our team.
Please go and play football. Because
we need that. We need the representation.
Haaland has nothing on that.
And Anne Sheepdip.
Yeah. And
there must be some good Anne Sheepdip chants.
Yeah. But in terms of, we were talking a little bit about this
before we started
recording, but I think you made some interesting points about the sort of aesthetic end of this, I think, didn't you, Joe?
Yeah, well, I think my take on it is that as, so many of us are kind of office workers, information, knowledge workers, we're all very online, and folk culture represents a kind of groundedness that's extremely appealing. It suggests that kind of reconnection to a sort of more rooted way of engaging with life and moving through the world. And I think one of my big touch points for this is the game Stardew Valley, which have you heard of that, Ollie?
No.
At some point, I for a long time actually, I've had this idea of getting you on a laptop playing Stardew Valley and commentating on what you see. I think it would be an amazing thing for us to do, because it's a wonderful game where basically you're a city office worker who inherits a farm, and it's in the middle of this like remote town called Stardew Valley, and you go there and you build your farm, and there's this evil corporation that's also setting up, and you. And
where's this set?
I don't actually know. I feel like it's like a modern fictionalized America.
Okay.
So it's not Britain.
I was imagining Midwest America as you were describing this, but that story could be anywhere really.
Yeah. You build your farm and that you get helped by little like forest spirits and stuff like that. And it's an extremely popular game, but I know a lot of people who love it as a just a kind of well-being outlet. You know, you work your stressful job and then you go home and you tend to the farm. The tented online farm.
So Joe, who is sufficiently disillusioned with his job that he's excited about the prospect of watching me play a computer game about farming, thinks that folk culture is on the rise because of that disillusionment. I think that's understandable, and I think my extension of that would be that obviously we live in a precarious times for a range of reasons. One of those feels like the sort of rise of large language models and the uncertainty of questions over the future of those knowledge economy and office-based jobs. And maybe we're hankering after something that predates all of that or has a rootedness in cultural forms that are harder to exploit and make part of a large language model. This isn't about tangible heritage or heritage that's been written down. This is about intangible cultural heritage. And there's obviously a degree to which...
represented, I think that a lot of folk... I'm thinking especially of sort of like folk... This is a very specific aspect of folk culture, but I'm thinking of like folk spirits and that kind of thing. It represents an embodiment of that intangible culture, I think, which makes it, well, more relatable, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit about intangible cultural heritage on the podcast in the past, but just a quick reminder that the UK is now, as of late 2024, a signatory to the UNESCO 2003 Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage. So in this context, this national context at least, we're finally recognising in a more formal way the value of those less tangible forms of cultural heritage. In parallel with that, we're obviously grappling with the environmental crisis, the climate crisis, wider poly crisis. And I think that's given rise to a remobilization of folk culture and folklore as a vehicle for connectivity to nature. There's a sort of sense in which people interpret folklore as being rooted in a more indigenous or traditional or archaic relationship with the landscape and the environment around us. Whether or not that's true doesn't really matter. But nevertheless, folklore and folk culture is constantly being reinvented in the present as part of that sort of intangible relationship with cultural forms. And so in that context, we see those mobilizations like Old Crocker and like the work of Right to Roam and Wild Service, like Hedge Morris, and all of these reimaginings, which are inventive, creative, playful, different, and different to previous folk revivals.
I'm thinking as well of Major Oak, the tree in Sherwood Forest that I think did it die a few years ago? They found it, or they found that it's
and there's that sense of
something
connectivity
about that, of like
to
embodying place and naming places, and I guess it, kind of going full circle in this episode, or at least when we were talking about wildfires and things like that, wildfires as well as large language models in this era of sort of environmental collapse and technological induced devastation, I suppose. We want ways to care more about the world, and I think folklore represents a sort of a device for doing that.
Yeah, and I think in relation to what you're saying about place names and sort of toponyms, and I think there's a recognition that those aren't quite just the fixed names on maps anymore. It came through quite strongly in Maggie O'Farrell's recent book Land, where she's talking about mapping in the early Ordnance Survey movements in Ireland, and the settling on formal and agreed names, and they're not necessarily the names that people call places, but they're the names that the authorities want places to be called. And this came through quite neatly a few years ago in a piece of work that Jeremy Burchard was experimenting playfully with, which was about children's toponyms, so children's place names. And we all have those kind of names where we give name to a particular tree, or there's a family name for a particular place that you like, or and they're sort of common touchstones, but they're not necessarily part of that agreed formal recognition. I think folklore is playful in that way, and folk practice as well. I think there are other things going on though, and part of it is about just changing aesthetics. So over time, over the course of, say, the 20th century, you have a number of different folk revivals. So the sort of early folk revivals and the collection of folk music around about the turn of the late 19th century into the beginning of the 20th century, and Cecil Sharp and those collectors active in that kind of context. After the Second World War, in the context of the Festival of Britain, the Lion and the Unicorn Pavilion sells a very particular version of vernacular and sort of conceptual Britishness, and it's not the same. It's a kind of mid-century modern version of that's kind of adapted to be both a kind of celebration of the tail end of empire, but also something that's progressive and modern, even though it's traditional and vernacular. So there's strawcraft sculpture by Fred Misen, there interesting other artworks and creative practice going on in that context. Fast forward a little bit later in the 20th century, and folk revival plays a different role. It's a sort of celebration of dying working class identity, or a sort of a cool Britannia kind of moment, late 20th century into the 90s, or into that 2012 Olympics moment, which feels like the kind of culmination of cool Britannia, and and we're now in a different kind of phase. And it's a different kind of folk culture, a different kind of national identity, and it's got a whole load of political complexity going on in it, and some of that right wing, and some of it's very left wing, and some of it's about creating a vernacular traditional culture that's inclusive and open to all, and some of it's about shutting that down and making something that's much more divisive. And I think our part in that is to be inclusive and play our part in collecting and charting as much of that as possible.
Well, it's interesting because I suppose it's a similar process, right, of looking at the past and sort of reapplying it and redesigning and what's the other I'm thinking of? Yeah, it's that similar process of looking at the past and seeing how you can apply it in the present that museum work does, but also people looking to the past for political motivations as well. And yeah, like you say, we have to engage with it in a way that we think is right. Yeah.
And I think these things are never settled.
No.
There's a kind of hint that somehow those conversations that Neil McGregor's show talks about in terms of who did we think we were, which is the title of the show, if you want to look it up on.
We'll put a link in the show notes as well.
There's a sense that some of those conversations that are happening early to mid 20th century have somehow been settled, but I'm not quite so sure that they have. No. I think these things are always being poked at and played at around the edges and unearthed again and revisited with a different slant, a little bit like re-exploring the origins of the Museum of English Rural Life.
Unearthed feels fitting for our museum's purposes, but I think you're right.
Regenerative.
Yeah, but I think you're right that as time moves on, it's almost as if it does collect the present sort of muddies it, and we have to reevaluate it, and we come at it with a different perspective.
Yeah, it's a bit like people think that museums are sort of fixed entities, and somehow the material in them represents a very concrete and tangible past, and therefore an unchanging past, a past that is settled and agreed and certain. But the more you spend time in museums and the more you look at museum documentation or the ways in which people have mobilized those collections in the past for very particular exhibitions and reasons and purposes, the more you realize it's all quite partial. It's all quite subjective.
We're a character in the present as well.
Yeah. So
actually, one thing I really enjoy about social media is I think it makes that very clear that we are an actual, we're a sort of force with a voice in the world. We're not trying to represent history in this extremely authoritative, static way. We're trying to move with it.
We're a bit part in that complex, holistic chaos. We're not John Maynard Keynes by any stretch of the imagination. No. But you were talking earlier, Joe, about what might happen for the museum's 100th. Maybe we'll be wrote back in and critiqued for our hot takes today, and when things have moved on in a direction that
but I guess that would be amazing, I suppose.
Yeah, and will we be grappling with ever bigger, more terrifying environmental challenges in another 25 years, or will we have resolved some of those issues? Will we be still arguing about the future and protection of the English countryside, or will we have settled some of that?
Well, look, keep listening because we can solve those questions together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen for the next 25 years whilst Joe and I get older and older. And will you be retired by then, Joe?
In 25 years?
Yeah.
No way.
No.
No.
I'm trying to think.
250 years at this point, I think.
I'd probably still be muddling on. Yeah. Like an old sheep farmer who can't quite give up.
With your potions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Beatrice Blackwood at the Pitt Rivers Museum, who the day after her retirement came back into work as if nothing had happened and just carried on.
Amazing.
I'm not going to do that, by the way.
No. Well, I think that's a good place to bring this one to an end. But yeah. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Ollie. That was a very nice, chat. Really good. Yeah. I'm glad we covered Bad Bunny and John Maynard Keynes in the same episode.
Yeah. It feels only fitting.
Feels complete. Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Absolute Units. Your hosts have been me, Joe Vaughan, and Dr. Ollie Douglas. Absolute Units is made possible by Museums Partnership Reading, our Arts Council funded partnership with Reading Museum. We're back in 2 weeks' time with more episodes. If you're enjoying, please leave reviews wherever you're listening. It means the world and it helps us reach new listeners. See you next time.